Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back to the Life Be Lifing podcast. I'm your host, Coach Emery Cannon. Today we have a very special guest. Back again for round two with me is Mario Wallace with All Things Strategic. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm glad to be back.
Yes, I absolutely. You gave us some great knowledge last time we were here. And first of all, thank you. I had a lot of calls about that show, and people were really interested in it, and that's why I wanted to bring you back. But today we're going to talk about something a little different. We helped the business owners last time, and I love that because I'm a
Mhm.
business owner. So I learned a lot, and a lot of my friends learned a lot. But today we're going to talk about something just a little bit different, still along the same lines, but we're going to talk about strategy and transitioning from a manager into leadership executive. And that's some really, really strong, that's a really strong uh, conversation because going from manager role to executive is a huge gap difference that they
Definitely.
don't tell you about. Nobody tells you about this. This is about this much gap. You have enough information as a manager to be effective to somebody that's in executive leadership, but you got to have certain qualities. And that's what you're here to tell us and
Exactly.
kind of bridge that gap for us. So tell us a little bit about what we're talking about. But first, I need you to tell everybody where they can reach you at.
I'm Dr. Mario Wallace with All Things Strategic. Again, All Things Strategic. You can reach me at allthingsstrategic.org. Again, allthingsstrategic.org. That's my actual official website.
Yes.
Oh, let me continue. So also you can probably reach me on, you can send me a message through LinkedIn at Mario Wallace, on Facebook, and as well as Instagram. The same thing, Mario Wallace.
Perfect. Perfect. So you're going to help us bridge the gap because a lot of corporate entities right now, they're scaling back. They're pivoting. They're scaling back. They're not giving us the training we need to be successful in roles they're hiring us for. Hey, do you agree with that?
Yes, yes. A lot of well, we can see it in the news today. Just yesterday, I saw that um, Google is scaled back at least 7,000. And that's approximately close to 250 people per day
Wow.
that is estimated this year. Uh, but the challenge is the market itself. Based on the shifting uh, dynamics in the market, it leads to uh, seeking new skills and new competencies from leaders
Mhm.
and from employees. And because of the shift, because today we're shifting from more process improvement to more artificial intelligence, and because of the shift in the
Yeah.
gap in skill set, it will lead to a lot of transitioning of people out of organizations. And we as minorities have to be more vigilant in how to uh, develop those skills and close those performance gaps to effectively do the work in these large scale organizations.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself. And that was a great example because I think I read the exact same thing. And I'm thinking, you brought up AI, and I just want to touch on it just a quick bit, man. Um, that is going to start decreasing, I think, some of the pay scales in leadership because we're using it so much right now. And to anybody that owns a business, I'll tell you what, you better get hip to it right now. That AI is a big, huge deal. It's going to save you time management and money all the way across the board as a small business. But we're not here to talk about those small businesses. We're going to talk about uh, give us an idea about transitioning from manager to leadership. Like, what gap do you see? Because you're out there in the world every day dealing with executives and you're dealing with managers and you're finding ways to strategically make it better. How do you do that?
So, the first thing I do, especially with clients, I have a questionnaire in which I ask them several questions about their role and responsibility in an organization. And also, I look at the market, as I mentioned about Google and different companies today that are seeking to transition into a more machine learning, artificial intelligent uh, environment. So, those are the type of questions I ask. Do you have these skill sets today?
Mhm.
So, if we look at a large scale organization, there are certain things that we have to do. We have to be effective in understanding financial data to be
Yes.
able to interpret the financial data to make uh, the most effective business decision. Then we have to be effective storytelling to be able to tell a story based on the financials to shareholders and stakeholders. That's internally and externally. We have to be more strategic, be able to identify a future place, what I call a strategic horizon, a
Hmm.
date and time in which we can fulfill and accomplish the goals of an organization. Uh, then have to be able to effectively communicate. Effectively communicate, meaning we just don't use the traditional top down version of communication because the top down version is based on hierarchy.
Yes.
Uh, because today communication does not flow necessarily top to bottom; it flows throughout. We have to understand how to effectively communicate in those type of environments uh, with the intent to change behavior in those environments. And lastly, we need to understand the intersection between change management, communication, strategy, and financial, right? So, based on these new changes, these new goals and objectives, we have to drive in a functioning organization that's very competitive. How do we ensure that we can mobilize the human resources, the employees in the organization to help a leader, an organization to effectively drive change to reach the goals of an organization? So the main thing is the lack of transition, the inability to effectively transition as a minority leader consists of uh, three things. One is understanding how to lead and what type of leadership style we should effectively use today.
Okay.
Um, the other is understanding the necessary skills to effectively compete as a leader and to move an organization forward. And the third is the competencies. What are the necessary competencies to effectively perform at a higher level in an organization? And because of those three things, what I see consistently is we derail, excuse me, we derail as minority leaders as we attempt to take an organization into the future.
Hmm. So so the transition part, because this is very important. A lot of people don't even understand when they're transitioning what they're transitioning into. And that's kind of what you're saying. Well, that is what you're saying. It's not kind of, it's exactly what you're saying. But going from, being promoted, going from manager to executive is, you have the basic functions as a manager, but running over here to this part, understanding what the numbers mean. You have the numbers as a manager, but what do they mean to the organization
Mm-hmm.
as a whole? As a manager, you have this circle of information, and another manager has this circle of information, and another one. But when you transition, you have to put that together to tell the story of what's really going on.
Exactly. So a manager is not the a decision maker, meaning the manager is not the person who determines the direction of an organization. So
Yes.
they are handed the strategy to execute. They are handed the strategy. They are not at the retreats developing the strategy. They are handed the strategy, and they have to transition that strategy to their employees to effectively accomplish the goals of an organization. When it comes to transitioning up, right, to executive leadership, managers are so skilled, and I want to say that again or emphasize it. They are so skilled at interpreting data. They live within data sets. Everything
Yes.
is about data. So they make decisions for their teams based on data. So they
Absolutely. That's it.
communicate data consistently, right? They talk about these different percents, these different ratios, um, to effectively move the needle in an organization. But the transition, when you're transitioning from a manager to an executive, it's not all about communicating hard data. It's about telling stories. It's
Yes.
about being able to understand the data, interpret the data, and tell a compelling story to move shareholders and stakeholders to a point or a position to buy into what you're trying to sell. And what
Absolutely.
happens is, because managers are steeped in data, they don't have the experiences in telling stories. And when they get to the executive level, they cannot effectively communicate with their peers because they're still trying to communicate data instead of telling a compelling story. So that is one of the first failures of minority leaders, is the lack or inability to effectively tell compelling stories using data.
Yes. So what how do we fix that, especially throughout the community, so that we can get more managers into executive leadership roles to be at the table, to be a decision maker? How do we fix that? I mean, besides calling you and all things strategic, just a generalization. How can we bridge that gap? Because it has to be a different type of thinking. You know, you have to go from data to visualizing how this tells a story.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
can they transition that?
Well, one thing is they have to practice storytelling.
Mm,
They have to figure out how to tell stories, and they need to be in the right circles to practice storytelling. This is an intentional thing to do, right? But they have to be aware that transitioning consists of more than to lead a group of people that they've done so effectively over time, right? It's
yes,
at the next level what is required: storytelling, understanding corporate finances, how to interpret corporate finances to tell a story, how to look at data sets such as EMR records, electronic medical records for patients' data. How do I look at that data, peel it apart, and communicate an effective story?
right,
How do I set goals and objectives across an organization to set a future projection and help drive a team in that direction? How do I effectively communicate? And how do I lead or mobilize people in a changing environment? Those are the core skill sets that are lacking amongst minority professionals because of the lack of development budgets in corporate organizations. What
right,
we find and what I see consistently is that corporate organizations tend to develop the majority leader or leaders in organizations, and tend to do the least amount of developing the minority leaders in organizations. Thus, the transition is difficult. They make the transition and they find out within 6 to 12 months that they are not effective as they once were as managers in organizations.
exactly. That and that is going to be always be the case because of the pivot and the scaling that's constantly going on to get shareholders more profit. Like that is always going to be the case, and that's why you have to invest in yourself, and you have to call Mario and be like, I'm ready to invest in myself so I can learn how to think strategically.
If
Because being a manager, you don't have to be a strategic thinker. You have to be a thinker of profit. But
Yes,
when you
or yeah, or a more transformational transactional leader as a manager,
yes,
right? You're transforming people who report to you, but you're making sure that they are achieving the transactions that's needed in an organization. When you scale up, it's not just your team. You're looking from a global perspective
global,
now,
yes,
right? So
exactly,
how do your skills support the organization, not your business unit. How do your skills support the larger organization and the community stakeholders and the shareholders who was a part of like the board of trustees? Because now you're reporting to a different group of stakeholders. And what
Exactly.
happens is we don't necessarily know how to effectively report and communicate with this different group of stakeholders. We continue to think from a narrow lens of our business unit, but now we're thinking from a global perspective, and we have to see how do our piece of the puzzle fits within the global perspective to drive change and move an organization to be highly competent and highly competitive in the market.
So I love how you mentioned that tunnel vision. So, and from going from a manager to an executive, you have to broaden the whole windshield. You got to look out the in driving. You have to look at out the both sides of the windshield, both sides, the rear view. You got to see exactly where you fit at in the lane. You
In
get
the
what I'm saying?
yes, yes,
And how to maneuver yourself all the way to your destination.
hmm
So you have to look every direction. And that's really the difference between tunnel vision and a global vision. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
transitioning into that part of it is going to be difficult if you've never been taught to think like that. So we have to retrain our brains to one think globally because you've only been thinking one way the
That's
entire
right.
time.
That's
So
right.
you have to retrain your brain to think globally, like, and that's a part of that storytelling. So can you give us an idea of how they can tell the story based off the numbers, but still? So use the skills as their man as being a manager, but making it into a story for the environment that they're in.
So let me think of. Let me give you an example. So just think of the person named Jocelyn. Jocelyn, and I'm gonna use it from talk about it based on the geography of Arkansas. So we have northwest Arkansas and we have southeast Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
In northwest Arkansas, we have people who live. The life expectancy is between 85 and 95 years old.
Okay.
In southeast Arkansas, the expectancy is between 55 and 65 years old. Now, we are in the same state.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you look at as a medical professional, a leader who is a medical professional, when he or she looks at data, they see a lot of health challenges across the state, right? So they're looking at an EMR system, which is an electronic medical record, and they may see that children in Southeast Arkansas has a high propensity of cervical cancer within the ages of 16 and 25 years old.
Okay.
Okay. So that leads to potentially early death in those particular communities of these particular people. So Jocelyn, who lives in Northwest Arkansas, has a um, has a higher uh, how do I put it? Jocelyn, who live in Northwest Arkansas, will have a longer life expectancy because of the food, because of the environment, because of several factors such as the access to better healthcare in her particular community. The
Okay.
same Jocelyn who lives in Southeast Arkansas, based on data, will have challenges in a lower life expectancy, meaning her life expectancy may she may between 55 and 65. Jocelyn, who live in Southeast Arkansas, may not live beyond 65 or 70 years old because of the same thing. She has uh, low access to health care versus Jocelyn, who live in Northwest Arkansas, has a higher access to health care. So, based on data, if I'm looking at an EMR system and I'm a leader, I can go in and pull out the data and tell the story about Jocelyn. I'm not telling you about all these different health indices that I'm seeing. I'm only telling you about a person named Jocelyn who lives in either Northwest Arkansas or Southeast Arkansas. And my
Got it.
story is about her life expectancy. So that
Got
is
it.
communicated to stakeholders. That's communicated to local legislators. That's communicated to policy advocacy. That's
Mhm.
communicated to the community. That's communicated to other healthcare providers within the state and within the region. And when I communicate that story about Jocelyn life expectancy because of the access to care in two different geographies within the same state, I am communicating a lot of information just within those few sentences.
Right. And so, and it's the first few sentences that really matter.
Yes.
Because that's,
Yes.
people cut their brains off every now and then while they're listening to data and listening to the story. They cut their brains off and then cut it back on. So the first 3 to 5 minutes have to be very compelling. And see, that's what we need to communicate to the people that's transitioning from manager to executive. Whatever you're saying, that you have to get your main points in those first 3 minutes, and it's got to be very compelling. It has to be something that they care about. You got to have feature, benefit, everything in that 5 minutes.
It's just 5 minutes. It's like this. If I'm in a town hall and I'm transitioning from a director, a manager to an executive, and I have to tell a story about the state of emergency of the state of Arkansas. When I walk to the mic, based on the data I've interpreted, I just say, "Hey, we are in a state of emergency." Uh, for instance, if we think of Jocelyn who lived in Northwest Arkansas and Jocelyn who lived in Southeast Arkansas, Jocelyn in Northwest Arkansas have a higher access to health care. And because of that, she has a longer life expectancy according to the data.
Right.
Jocelyn, who lives in Southeast Arkansas, because of the lack of access to healthcare, she have a shorter life expectancy. These
Right.
are things that we need to address. We need to talk to our local policy makers. We need to talk to our local legislator. We need to talk to the federal legislator as well, so that we can start to addressing and providing the right resources for Jocelyn who lived in Southeast Arkansas. That's the story.
That's the story. So, how does a manager transitioning into executive develop the communication to do that?
So once the story is told, we have to build out strategies around the story, right? We have to determine who we need to talk with, right? In such as our local stakeholders and our legislators, right? We have to be
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate a compelling message, not only to them, but down throughout the organization.
Yeah.
The problem is today is that we think and we still lean on top down leadership. And
Yeah.
top down leadership tends to believe that the people at the bottom don't have, uh, that they're not paid to come up with ideas.
Right.
And what we find, and I know you've probably seen this before, if there is a new technology or change implemented in an organization, and it starts from the top and it goes to the bottom, when the people at the bottom start working with that new technology, they start to run into different challenges, and they begin to voice their experiences with the new technology.
Yeah.
And because they are not the decision makers, leaders tend to overlook the things that they're saying. But
Just
if we
do it.
just do it, but if we
Yeah.
listen to them, they can help us find solutions to the problem because they're the ones who are doing the work. Now, this
Exactly.
is related to communication. What we need to start doing is not only top down communication, but bottom up communication as well. We
Exactly.
need to provide opportunities for people within the organization, the first tier, the second tier, and the third tier, to be able to share and voice their challenges related to new things we're implementing in organizations.
Yes.
If we can do that, then we can set ourselves up like different tech companies. Tech companies listen to people all throughout the organization, and that is what stimulates. innovation. Communication
Yes.
is more effective when we allow everybody in the organization to have a voice in the things that we're implementing. And that accelerates behavior change more effectively because they feel that they are part of something. And it also accelerates innovation within organizations.
That's a true definition of active listening. When you can listen from the top down and the bottom back up. And that's what creates a team. Because it's all one team no matter what. And that's the only thing that creates a team is being able to be heard and being felt that you've been heard. And you are more, you'll be able to uh, be a part of the team when that happens. And people work harder when they're a part of the team.
So let me say this right here. There's a researcher named Dr. Damon Centola, and there's another one named Dr. Malaz Bustani. Dr. Malaz Bustani just wrote the book Agile Diffusion. And Dr. Damon Centola wrote the book. It's called Change. And what they find is that when new things are implemented in organizations, people who've done things a certain way for a long period of time tend to become resistant to the new
Yes.
things that are implemented. And when resistance develop in organization, people begin to what they coined self-organize. Let me
Mm-hmm.
explain. Uh, People begin in organizations begin to self-organize to seek out people in groups in the organization who has a clue on how to use the new technology or a clue on how to work in the new environment.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing happens when you introduce a new change is people begin to self-organize, and they self-organize around people who have the ideas to be effective in the new environment. Now, when it comes to communication, the manager tends to communicate down to the people, right?
Exactly.
Well, when people self-organize, it's the person in the group who they self-organize with who has the stronger voice. It is not the manager anymore.
Right.
So if I self-organize with you and four other people, and we think you are the one who really understand how to survive in a new environment, I will listen to you more so than my manager. And the,
Yes.
and so how do we effectively communicate? We identify how people self-organize in organizations.
Yeah.
Once we identify how they self-organize, we identify the key influencer within the group that they're in, and we start to communicate information to the key influencer who by chance effectively communicated with the people who have self-organized around him or her. That is
Mm-hmm.
the most effective way to communicate today.
Yes. 100%. I got to get those books. So after this, send me a text message on
Okay.
those books.
Okay.
I want to read that. So when you talk about strategy and communication, is there a way to get someone to have that light click on? Because that's what really it takes. It's like you have to burrow it down into the manager becoming the executive leader,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes certain strategy to talk to that person to get them off the number value and on the people value, because
Yeah.
that's really where the that's where his counterparts are killing killing the role. Like this is where the fit comes in at, is knowing how to tell the story, knowing how to make the numbers or the finance drag the story into a compelling story to become an effective leader and be able to tell the story to the shareholders and all those people.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
what would it take for somebody to say, okay, this number means this and these, because they're not only using their one number anymore, they're using a body of numbers over here. This because to me, this is the manager side, this is the leadership side, this is executive leadership side, right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
You go from your lane that we were talking about earlier to taking everybody's lane, dumping it over here. Now I know my numbers from what I used to do, but how do I take this entire body of work and tell the story?
So the first thing is, there's something called we call situational leadership, and it's just a leadership style. It's how to understand the situation in the organization first, and then how to take that situation and communicate it down to your team and mobilize them to do effective work. Uh, so, based on new strategies that happening in the organization, the executive leadership team has created a new strategic plan. It's taking them from the south to the north, right? To be more competitive in the market. That new leader who's transitioning has to be able to be uh, inclusive in the development of the strategy first, but
Mm-hmm.
how to be able to effectively know his or her role as it relates to the actual strategy, so that he or she knows their particular piece of the puzzle, how it affects the rest of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Based on that, this create a situational type uh, concept where they have to figure out how to adjust their business practices to the larger scale of the organization,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
right? In the past, they have focused on their own strategies within their business unit without looking at the larger organization. As you
Right.
transition up, you now have to focus on your division or business unit, but also the global impact of the organization. So now you're working with other C-suite leaders on how you all can effectively work collaboratively to move the strategy forward. So once you understand your marching orders as an executive, you understand where the companies are in the gaps within performance. You take your piece of the strategy, you adjust your business or division according to the strategy, and you effectively communicate the information down. Remember, we're seeking, as we communicate, we have to make sure that we are talking to key influencers, and we have to make sure that we know how to effectively mobilize the people in the business unit and cross functionally, meaning mobilize the people within your business unit and connect them to people who are working on similar projects in other business units, so that we can
Yes.
walk in lockstep as a organization and not specifically as a business unit. Here's the thing: business units have competitors who they compete against in the market.
Yes.
The corporate strategy is a group is a a a a book of portfolios. Let me explain. The corporate strategy looks at all the strategies of each business unit as a portfolio in a as within a portfolio perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
The corporation is competing as a corporation, but each business unit is competing individually against their competitors in the market, right?
Right.
But what you have to do is make sure your strategy and the things that you communicate connects with the larger organization in order to help move the organization forward, as well as compete within your own industry as a divisional or a business unit. And what happens is a lot of the minorities who make the transition, they continue to only compete within their industry. They only
Mm-hmm.
compete at their business unit level, and they never connect with the resources of the larger organization to help the organization win. And because of that, the leaders on the C-suite team looks at that person as a uh, not a um, effective player within their scheme.
Yes. Because he's not showing the qualities.
He not showing qualities as a team player at the executive level, which eventually leads to backroom conversation that may cause that person to be ousted out the organization.
Termination.
Yeah. And
So, though, but it is a life lesson to learn in that. Uh, if they give you valuable feedback. And once you get so as a manager, you get action plans, and this is where I think a lot of people get leadership executive leadership confused with manager leadership is there's action plans for managers. You get
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? They
Yes.
put it
Yes. Yes.
together for you like this is what we see you doing wrong and this is how you can correct it. And just like you said, the backroom conversation for executive leadership is different. That is the action plan. There is nobody going to come and tell you, look, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. The conversation already happened. It's when are we getting rid of you?
Yeah.
It's two different. When you step into that next world over here of executive leadership, is a you understood
You know.
versus you can be helped on this side. This is where you have to be. You're almost like a business owner in this situation.
Yes.
You are the beginning and the end of this over here.
One thing I know is that research tells us that within 6 months of new minority leaders coming in, transitioning into a new organization or a new culture, they begin to derail within 6 months. Within 12 months, they're either they've received some type of disciplinary action, or they've been fired or ousted out the organization. And
Correct.
see, derailment starts when you're integrating into culture, right? Culture has its competing priorities against things that you bring to an organization. You may have been hired to bring change to a specific division within the organization, but it's how you bring that change to the organization. You have to take baby steps. You have
Yeah.
to learn the culture first before you start to suggest changes in the culture. And what happens is a lot of leaders go into a new situation without the proper skill sets to effectively uh, uh, implement new change.
Mm-hmm.
They go in all gun ho because they are probably the experts of this subject matter, uh,
Exactly.
but the institution is not necessarily ready for the change. So you have to go in, you have to engage and interact with your peers. You have to do communication campaigns across the organization to feel and learn how the people react to you, right?
Exactly.
You have to collaborate and partner with people who have a more stronger impact on the culture before you do it independently, right? And then once you have not derailed, you set a presence on the actual within the organization, then you can start to implement new things. But when you begin to implement new things, you have to be an effective storyteller. You have to
Yes.
be able to share with them based on data that was collected internally or externally. This is the problem. Um, you have to be able to mobilize the people and align them to the strategy. So here is a strategy that was set. When you came in the organization, when a minority leader comes in an organization, as we discussed earlier, they're coming into a problem.
Yes.
So they already know what the problem is. So they have to align with the strategy that already exists. And within the strategy, there's always what we call performance gaps. The resources who have to help execute on the strategy may not have the necessary skills and competencies. That leader must be able to identify the performance gaps.
Yes. Yes.
Then the leader has to be able to close the performance gap, meaning find the necessary resources, connect people with the necessary development or the certifications to help execute on a new strategy. And then the leader has to do another step, and that is to be able to now we're working on their development skills,
Mm-hmm.
but there still will be a level of resistance. And according to
Yes.
research, there's going to be at least 20% resistance across any organization.
Yeah.
So if we go in and if we communicate effectively, we align the organization to our business unit to the strategy. We connect with our peers in conversation, and how do we collectively move the strategy forward? We develop the team, or we identify the skills and competencies needed to develop the team to do the work. But what we did not do is expect the level of resistance that we're experiencing now. What happens is it causes the strategy to derail,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
right? So what we find is a leader may come into an organization, a minority leader, with all the capabilities, and they miss out on one key piece. And the piece I'm saying right now is, which is just an example, is change and resistance. They've developed a team, they've communicated effectively, and the team is ready to do the work. But when they implement certain new initiatives, resistance begin to build up. And because of the resistance, the new initiatives is never fully executed, which
Exactly.
affects the reputation
Of that
of that
leader.
leader in an
Yeah.
organization.
And you know what? This is a true story. Anytime, and you're exactly right. Uh, and the problem is because minority leaders don't bring a team with them prepared for resistance, and it's quite the opposite on the other side. I've watched it on both areas where the majority leaders would come in. They have a team from wherever they came from,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
ready to because they know that you have to fulfill the plan because they believe in you. They believe in you. So they're coming with you to make sure your plan is instilled and the shareholders can see how great you are. Minority leaders lack doing that, having a team ready to displace the resistance because the only way to be successful in this and I don't know if you agree with me or not, you have to get rid of the resistance
No,
immediately.
yes, yes, yes. Well,
You have to, and so you have to have somebody prepared and qualified to take that spot because resistance will slow down your performance, and what will happen then? You're ousted, derailed, all of that. The resistance, you have to have somebody prepared to replace the resistance. Resistance to me is like cancer, and if you don't gut it out, you give it a time. Don't get me wrong, I'll give resistance 3 months. When I come into an organization and somebody's against my plan on how to, I'll give it 3 months. Look, let me show you how this works. See how John is over here and he's working my plan and he's more successful. And I say, you see Mike over here, you see how he's working my plan? He's more successful, and you are still doing the old plan because that's all you know. I need you to open your mind. I need you to try it. Here, give me 5 days on the way I want you to do it. And if you don't see a difference, then do it your way. But they still are going to be more successful because this is a proven plan. It may take 2 weeks, but if you only want to give it a week, I just need you to see how much easier, because I don't bring anything to the any skills to the organization that's going to slow you down. It's going
mhm.
to make you faster, efficient, proficient.
Yes, yes.
That's what we're here to do.
From the top, like key leaders, the executive team, they set the direction. And if they say that we need a new uh, culture, or we need a new technology, and they purchase this technology, the executive know that there will be a level of resistance. So they know that just through research, and they know that through experience. So um, they know that if we think of a bar here, they know that when they first introduce this new change, it's going to dip. Performance would dip in the organization. And when
Mm-hmm.
performance dips, so does productivity. And when productivity dips, so does finances, right? So they
Yes.
know that would take place. The thing about it is, how long does it dip, or does it keep dipping? As it continues to dip, you're losing dollars, you're losing productivity, and you're losing your competitive position in the market. The leader has to be able uh, to mitigate the resistance so that the curvature go from the dip and it starts moving its way back up.
Exactly.
And what happens is, a lot of minority leaders don't look at that as their responsibility.
Yeah.
right? What they do, they implement things, they implement the new technology, and they communicate to their team why it's important for them to help to start to learn the skills of the new technologies to remain competitive as they once were in the previous or legacy technology. And from that point on, they do not know how to mitigate the resistance.
Yeah.
And because of their lack of ability or inability to mitigate resistance, the organization continuously lose money.
Yeah.
Productivity continuously drop. And overall, that is a dashboard, or that is a record that will be communicated back to that minority leader about his or her performance,
Yes.
right? And because of that, that is what lead to the disciplinary actions, and it leads to the outing of that leader. A leader can't just understand what the goals are of an organization. A leader must also know how to mitigate resistance within the execution of initiatives in organizations that makes that organization highly competitive.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said that better myself. You were spot on that. And I think that we, first of all, if somebody's moving from the manager side to executive side, they definitely need to give you a call because they need something to switch, get their mind to switch differently. And because being effective as a manager and being a skilled leader in the executive side takes a totally different thought process,
Yes.
and you can give them those skills that they need. And then just on these few points that we talked about today, that can make you successful. But then you want to continue the success. And that's why they need to talk to you so they can have continued success throughout their career. Because once you're an executive leader, it doesn't matter if you're an executive leader for GM or a hospital or a nonprofit. You know, they look at you and you're not just a manager of car automotive. You're not just a manager of a hospital or whatever it is that you started at. You are an executive of people,
That's right. That's right. That's
and
right.
that's a different lifestyle. And we don't have enough minorities in that position. And the only way to do it is to start to learn how to switch the way you think.
Yeah, and we have to understand leadership styles too, right? You know, we've for years we're some of the big styles that we use is servant leader, transformational leader, situational leader. Uh, but leadership styles was based on research, and it was and leadership style was based on periods of time that took place in the world or within the United States. In
Right.
the last 15 to 20 years, we've transitioned out of transformational leadership. It's not to say that it's not valuable, but we've transitioned into psychologically safe leadership,
Empathetic leadership.
empathetic leadership, right? Ethical leadership. So,
Yes.
based on the time, a leader must be able to scan the environment and understand the best leadership approach. There is no one size fit all. And the
No.
minority leader needs to be more steeped in the different leadership approaches today to be able to create a hodgepodge or a hybrid version of taking a piece from psychologically safe leadership, ethical leadership, empathetic leadership, and put those pieces together and lead that direction, right? You have to go into a culture, interpret the reaction of the culture, and then set your leadership style and leadership approach to be effective.
Absolutely.
And so these are some of the skill set we have to shift, right? When transitioning from a manager to an executive, we have to be able to make assessments and adjust according to those assessment of the people in the organizations in order to be highly effective. But when we make those assessments, there's key things we need to have. We need to understand corporate finance to be able to interpret financial data as it relates to your independent impact and the organizational impact. We have
Yeah.
to understand storytelling and how to effectively use corporate financial data to tell stories and operational data to tell stories. We have to be able to set strategy or be effective in developing strategy and executing strategy, as well as communicating and mobilizing people in a changing environment to consistently be productive in an organization to help the organization to achieve its financial outcomes and operational outcomes to remain competitive.
Yeah. That's that's everything we talked about today. Look, I think that's the perfect place to stop at. If they need any more direction on going from a manager to an executive leader, they need to call you where?
At allthingsstrategic.org. And that is all things strategic, uh, all things with an S. So there's two S's between all things and then strategic. So allthingsstrategic.org.
Perfect. Look, I love these conversations we have. We got to get you back on again because you're giving the community so much information to be able to grow. And that's really what it's all about. Is, I'm not a gatekeeper of information. You know, the more information you have, the more successful you will be. And so when they give you a call, they're going to need your expertise because you are the expert.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a period. I've learned so much just from this conversation today. And the last conversation when we were just talking to small business owners and entrepreneurs. And I mean, we got to get you back in here to do another one and another one because the information is important. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I thank you guys for listening, and I hope that you guys have a great day. And I hope you guys learned a lot from Mario today because Mario has the game and ran with it. I can
Thank
tell
you.
you that
I
now.
always think it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure coming onto your podcast and talking with you. And I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about working with minority leaders, and I know based on the research and based on the lessons that I teach, even in higher ed institution, I'm always keeping an eye on the gaps as it relates to minority professionals to
Yeah.
ensure that they remain competitive in the workplace and irreplaceable. And my whole thing is to ensure that they're never replaced in the workforce and they're some of the most effective leaders that drive performance in organizations.
The next time I have you on, I want to talk about how AI will help us uh, be effective as well. So just putting that out there. Hopefully, you can make it back with us, and you'll have some great information on that as well. Because I'm very interested to see how that's going to work. Uh, but yeah, you have the answers. I know you're out there doing a lot of great work for the minority leader, and I want to thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for giving us all these jewels and these gems for us to run with and try to become better leaders.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you have a great rest of the day.
You do the same.
Guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Bye for now.